Sarah's world plunged into darkness as she stumbled, her cane clattering away. A warm, furry body pressed against her leg, and a gentle whine pierced the chaos. The stray dog she'd rescued was about to become her unlikely savior. Sarah Thompson's fingers trembled as she gripped a worn leather leash, her clouded eyes staring unseeing at the busy Boston street before her. The cacophony of car horns, chattering pedestrians, and rumbling engines overwhelmed her senses. A stark reminder of how much her world had changed since losing her sight to a degenerative disease in her teens. At 35, Sarah had built a life of careful routine and hard-won independence, working as an accessibility consultant and navigating her neighborhood with practiced ease. But today, everything felt different. The cause of her unease pressed against her leg, a shaggy, scarred mutt she had impulsively rescued from the streets just days ago. Max, as she'd named him, was an unknown variable in her meticulously ordered world. Sarah had always loved dogs, but the idea of relying on an untrained stray for guidance seemed foolish at best, dangerous at worst. Yet something about Max's gentle persistence and the way he seemed to anticipate her needs had made her pause before calling the shelter. "You're being ridiculous," Sarah muttered to herself, adjusting her grip on the leash. "He's just a dog, not a trained guide. This isn't some fairy tale where strays become heroes." Despite her misgivings, Sarah took a deep breath and stepped off the curb, her cane sweeping in a practiced arc before her. Max moved forward confidently, maintaining a steady tension on the leash. For a moment, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be a complete disaster after all. That hope was short-lived. A sudden cacophony of shouts and screeching tires erupted to her left. Sarah froze, her heart pounding as she tried to make sense of the chaos. Before she could react, Max lunged forward, nearly yanking the leash from her grasp. Sarah stumbled, her cane flying from her hand as she struggled to regain her balance. "Max, stop!" she cried out, panic rising in her throat. Without her cane, she was completely disoriented. The noise of the street seemed to close in around her, a dizzying whirlwind of sound that left her gasping for breath. Just as Sarah was certain she would fall, Max pressed his body firmly against her leg. His fur was warm and solid beneath her trembling fingers. A soft whine cut through the noise, and Sarah felt the dog gently tug her forward. "What are you doing?" she whispered, torn between fear and a strange, instinctive trust. With no other choice, Sarah allowed Max to guide her, taking small, hesitant steps. "Oh my God, that was close." A man's voice exclaimed nearby. "Are you all right, miss? That truck nearly hit you." Sarah's knees went weak as the realization of what had just happened washed over her. I'm fine," she managed to stammer, "thanks to my dog." As the adrenaline began to subside, Sarah became aware of a small crowd gathering around her. Concerned voices overlapped, offering help and expressing amazement at Max's quick thinking. "That's some dog you've got there," an older woman said, her voice warm with admiration. "I've never seen anything like it. He moved so fast to get you out of the way." Sarah knelt down, her hands shaking as she ran them over Max's fur. The dog nuzzled her cheek, his tail thumping steadily against the pavement. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Such a good, brave boy." As the crowd began to disperse, a familiar voice cut through the din. "Sarah? Sarah? Are you okay?" I saw what happened from across the street. It was Mark Rodriguez, Sarah's well-meaning but often overprotective neighbor. She could hear the concern and barely concealed panic in his voice as he approached. "I'm fine, Mark," Sarah assured him, straightening up but keeping one hand firmly on Max's back. "Thanks to Max here. He saved me." "A stray?" Mark's voice was heavy with skepticism. "Sarah, this is exactly what I was worried about. Using an untrained dog as a guide is incredibly dangerous. You could have been killed." Sarah bristled at his tone. "But I wasn't," she said firmly. "Max knew exactly what to do. He got me out of harm's way." "It was a fluke," Mark insisted. "You can't rely on—" "Excuse me," a new voice interjected. The clipped, professional tone immediately caught Sarah's attention. "I'm Dr. Olivia Chun. I'm a veterinarian, and I witnessed what happened. May I take a look at your dog?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before nodding. She listened intently as Dr. Chun examined Max, murmuring softly to the dog as she worked. "Remarkable," the vet said finally. "He's clearly not a trained service animal, but his instincts are extraordinary. The way he positioned himself to guide you, it's almost as if he has a natural talent for it." A spark of hope ignited in Sarah's chest. "Do you really think so?" "I've worked with service dogs before," Dr. Chun replied. "While Max here certainly isn't formally trained, there's definitely potential. With some work, he could be a real guide dog." Sarah finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now wait a minute," Mark cut in. "You can't seriously be considering this. Sarah, there are professional organizations that provide trained guide dogs. It's not safe to rely on a stray you found on the street." Sarah felt a flash of anger at Mark's dismissive tone. Before she could respond, Dr. Chun spoke up again. "While it's true that professionally trained guide dogs are the standard, there have been cases of dogs showing natural aptitude for assistance work," the vet explained. "It's rare, but not unheard of. With proper training and evaluation, it's possible that Max could become a certified guide dog." Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. She had always resisted the idea of a guide dog, clinging fiercely to her independence. But the connection she felt with Max was undeniable. For the first time since losing her sight, she felt a glimmer of hope for a different kind of freedom. What would it take? Sarah asked, her voice steadier now. "To train him, it would be a significant commitment," Dr. Chun cautioned. "Months of intensive training, evaluations, and certifications. And there's no guarantee of success. But if you're willing to put in the work, I am," Sarah said firmly, cutting off Mark's attempted protest. "Whatever it takes." As they discussed the next steps, Sarah felt Max lean against her leg, his presence a steady, comforting weight. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with skepticism and obstacles. But in that moment, with her hand buried in Max's fur and the memory of his unwavering guidance fresh in her mind, Sarah felt ready to face whatever came next. Little did she know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test her resolve, challenge her perceptions, and ultimately change not only her life, but the lives of countless others. As she and Max took their first steps towards an uncertain future, the bonds of trust and companionship between them began to forge something truly extraordinary. A partnership that would defy expectations and redefine what it meant to truly see. As Sarah settled into her small, meticulously organized apartment that evening, the events of the day replayed in her mind. The lingering adrenaline made her fingers tremble slightly as she prepared Max's dinner. The rhythmic sound of kibble hitting the metal bowl, a soothing counterpoint to her racing thoughts. "You really are something special, aren't you?" she murmured, listening to Max's enthusiastic crunching. A wry smile tugged at her lips. "Though I'm sure any dog would seem special to someone who can't see them." Sarah's journey to this moment had been a long and often painful one. Losing her sight at 16 had felt like the end of the world. Gone were her dreams of becoming a photographer, capturing the beauty of the world through her lens. Instead, she'd been thrust into a world of darkness, forced to relearn even the simplest tasks. But Sarah Thompson was nothing if not stubborn. She'd thrown herself into rehabilitation with a fierce determination, learning Braille, mastering the use of a cane, and adapting her other senses to navigate the world. By the time she'd finished college with a degree in social work, she'd regained much of her independence. Now, as an accessibility consultant, Sarah used her experiences to help businesses and organizations become more inclusive for people with disabilities. It was fulfilling work, but it often left her feeling isolated. Her colleagues respected her expertise, but few seemed to see past her disability to the woman beneath. A wet nose nudged her hand, pulling Sarah from her reverie. She laughed softly, scratching behind Max's ears. "You don't care about any of that, do you? You just see me." The irony of her words hit her, and Sarah shook her head, marveling at how quickly this scruffy stray had wormed his way into her heart. She thought back to the day she'd found him, huddled and whimpering in an alley near her favorite coffee shop. "You sounded so pitiful," Sarah told Max as she made her way to the couch, patting the cushion beside her in invitation. The dog's nails clicked on the hardwood floor as he trotted over, settling his weight against her side. I couldn't just leave you there. Even though I knew it was crazy to bring home a stray, Sarah had always loved animals. But after losing her sight, she'd shied away from the idea of a pet. It seemed like too much responsibility, too many variables in her carefully controlled life. But something about Max's gentle persistence had broken through her defenses. "Doctor, Chun seems to think you have potential," Sarah mused, running her fingers through Max's coarse fur. "But it's not going to be easy. There's so much to learn for both of us." As if in response, Max let out a soft whine and nuzzled her hand. Sarah smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of connection, of being truly seen and accepted. A sharp knock at the door startled them both. Max's head lifted, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Easy, boy," Sarah soothed, rising to answer the door. She didn't need to ask who it was. She recognized the impatient rap of knuckles. "Mark," she said, as she opened the door, keeping her tone neutral. "What brings you by?" "I wanted to check on you," her neighbor replied, his voice tight with poorly concealed worry. "After what happened today?" "Sarah, we need to talk about this dog situation," Sarah sighed, stepping back to allow Mark into the apartment. She'd known this conversation was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. Mark had been a constant presence in her life since she'd moved into the building 3 years ago. His intentions were good, but his protectiveness often veered into stifling territory. "There's nothing to discuss, Mark," Sarah said firmly as she closed the door. "Max saved my life today, Doctor. Chun believes he has real potential as a guide dog. A stray with no training?" Mark's skepticism was palpable. "Sarah, be reasonable. You can't risk your safety on some fairy tale notion that this mutt is going to become a certified service animal." The dismissive tone in Mark's voice stirred a familiar frustration in Sarah. It was the same tone she'd heard countless times over the years from well-meaning friends, overprotective family members, and strangers who assumed her blindness made her incapable. "I'm not being unreasonable," Sarah countered, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "I'm making an informed decision based on what I experienced today and the professional opinion of a veterinarian who specializes in working with service animals." She could hear Mark pacing, his footsteps sharp against the hardwood floor. Max pressed closer to her leg, as if sensing the tension in the room. "And what happens if it doesn't work out?" Mark demanded. "What if he's aggressive towards other dogs, or gets distracted at a crucial moment? You could get hurt, Sarah. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you." The genuine concern in Mark's voice softened Sarah's anger slightly, but it didn't diminish her resolve. "I appreciate your worry, Mark. I do. But I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions. Max and I will work with trainers, go through all the necessary evaluations. If it doesn't work out then, well, I'll have gained a loyal pet, at the very least." "A pet you can't properly care for," Mark muttered, but Sarah heard him clearly. "I am perfectly capable of caring for a dog," she said, her voice sharp. "My blindness doesn't make me helpless, Mark. When are you going to understand that?" A heavy silence fell between them. Sarah could almost feel the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. She and Mark had danced around this topic for years, his protectiveness clashing with her fierce independence. Finally, Mark sighed heavily. "I just worry about you, Sarah. You're important to me, more than you know." The vulnerability in his voice caught Sarah off guard. She'd always known Mark cared for her, but the depth of emotion in those words hinted at something more. It was a complication she wasn't sure she was ready to face. "I know you care, Mark," she said softly, "but you have to trust me. Trust that I know what I'm doing, that I can handle this." Another long pause followed. Sarah could practically hear the gears turning in Mark's head as he wrestled with his conflicting emotions. "All right," he said at last, his voice resigned. "I don't like it, but I'll support you. Just promise me you'll be careful, and call me if you need anything day or night." Relief washed over Sarah. "I promise," she said, reaching out to squeeze Mark's arm. "Thank you for understanding." As Mark said his goodbyes and left, Sarah leaned against the closed door, exhaling slowly. Max whined softly, nudging her hand. Well, that's one hurdle down, she told the dog, scratching behind his ears. But something tells me we've got plenty more ahead of us. Sarah's mind drifted to the challenges that lay before them. Training a guide dog was an intense process, even with animals specifically bred for the task. Working with a stray of unknown background would be exponentially more difficult. There would be skeptics at every turn, people who doubted Max's abilities and Sarah's judgment. But as Max leaned his solid weight against her leg, Sarah felt a surge of determination. This dog had already defied expectations once, saving her from certain injury or worse. Who was to say what other miracles they might accomplish together? We're gonna prove them all wrong, Sarah whispered fiercely, dropping to her knees to wrap her arms around Max's neck. The dog's tail thumped steadily against the floor, a rhythm that seemed to echo the resolve building in Sarah's heart. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a future she'd never dared to dream of before. A future where she moved through the world with confidence, Max a steady presence at her side. A future where she could expand her work, advocate for others, and push the boundaries of what people believe possible for those with disabilities. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But as Sarah drifted off to sleep, Max curled protectively at the foot of her bed. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she and Max would face them together. Little did Sarah know that their journey was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would test their bond, challenge their resolve, and ultimately change not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. As the first light of dawn crept through her windows, Sarah slept on, blissfully unaware of the extraordinary adventure that awaited them. The shrill ring of Sarah's phone cut through the early morning silence, startling her awake. Max's nails clicked on the hardwood as he jumped off the bed, a low whine of concern accompanying the unexpected noise. "Hello," Sarah answered grudgingly, fumbling for the device on her nightstand. "Sarah, it's Dr. Chun. I hope I didn't wake you, but I have some news that couldn't wait." Instantly alert, Sarah sat up straighter. "What is it? Is everything okay?" "More than okay, Doctor," Chun replied, an undercurrent of excitement in her voice. "I reached out to some colleagues last night about Max's situation. There's a researcher at Tufts University who's been studying the potential of rescue dogs as service animals. Dr. Eliza Ramirez. She's fascinated by Max's case and wants to meet with us today if possible." Sarah's heart raced. This was happening so fast. The events of the past 24 hours spinning her carefully ordered world into beautiful chaos. Today? Yes, of course. What time? As Dr. Chun relayed the details, Sarah's mind whirled with possibilities. This could be the break they needed, a chance to prove that Max's heroic act wasn't just a fluke. But doubt nagged at the edges of her excitement. What if Max didn't live up to expectations? What if she was pinning her hopes on an impossible dream? "Sarah, are you still there?" Dr. Chun's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "Yes, sorry." Sarah shook her head, focusing on the present. "We'll be there." "Thank you so much for doing this, dear Chun." After hanging up, Sarah sat for a moment, letting the reality of the situation wash over her. A warm weight pressed against her leg as Max sensed her need for comfort. "Well, boy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "Looks like today's the day we start proving everyone wrong." The next few hours passed in a blur of nervous energy. Sarah meticulously groomed Max, wanting him to make the best possible impression. As she ran a brush through his coat, she couldn't help but marvel at the turn her life had taken. "You know, a week ago I was perfectly content with my routines," she told Max, who listened with what she imagined was rapt attention. "No complications, no surprises. And now look at us." A soft whine and a gentle nudge of Max's nose against her hand was his only response. But it filled Sarah with a warmth that chased away her lingering doubts. As they made their way to Tufts University's veterinary school, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. The familiar streets of Boston took on a new significance as she imagined a future where she and Max navigated them together as a team. Upon arrival, they were greeted by Dr. Chen, whose usual professional demeanor was tinged with an undercurrent of enthusiasm. "Sarah, Max, right this way," she said, leading them through the bustling corridors of the veterinary school. "Dr. Ramirez is eager to meet you both." As they entered the research lab, Sarah was struck by the cacophony of sounds, the whir of machinery, the muted conversations of researchers, and the occasional bark or meow from unseen animals. "Dr. Ramirez?" Dr. Chung called out. "Sarah Thompson and Max are here." "Wonderful," a warm, accented voice responded. Sarah heard footsteps approaching, then felt a hand gently touch her arm. "Miss Thompson, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Dr. Eliza Ramirez." Sarah shook the offered hand, smiling. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice, Dr. Ramirez. This is Max." She felt Max shift beside her, his tail thumping against her leg. "Well, hello there, Max," Dr. Ramirez said, her voice dropping to a softer tone as she presumably knelt to greet the dog. "Aren't you a handsome fellow? Dr. Chen tells me you're quite the hero." For the next hour, Sarah recounted the events of the previous day, while Dr. Ramirez and her team observed Max's behavior and ran a series of preliminary tests. Sarah's heart swelled with pride as she heard the researchers' murmurs of approval and interest. "Ms. Thompson," Dr. Ramirez said finally, her voice brimming with barely contained excitement, "I have to say, Max here is quite remarkable. His instincts for guidance and his attunement to your needs are extraordinary, especially for an untrained rescue." Sarah felt a surge of vindication. "So you think he has potential as a guide dog?" "Potential? My dear, I think Max could revolutionize the way we think about service animal training," Dr. Ramirez replied. "His natural abilities combined with his bond with you. It's unlike anything I've seen in my years of research." The scientist's words sent a thrill of excitement through Sarah, but before she could fully process their implications, Dr. Ramirez continued. "I'd like to propose something, Miss Thompson. My team and I are about to begin a new study on the efficacy of rescue dogs as service animals. Would you and Max be willing to participate?" Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was more than she dared to hope for. What would that involve? It would be an intensive 6-month program, Dr. Ramirez explained. "You and Max would work with our trainers daily, learning the skills necessary for him to become a certified guide dog. We'd document your progress, using it as a case study for our research." Sarah's mind raced. 6 months of intensive training would be a massive commitment, potentially disrupting her work and routines. But the opportunity it presented was too significant to ignore. "There's just one catch," Dr. Ramirez added, a note of hesitation entering her voice. "The study is taking place at our partner facility in Colorado. You'd need to relocate for the duration of the program." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Colorado? Leave behind her job, her apartment, the city she'd painstakingly learned to navigate. It seemed an impossible ask. I don't know if I can," Sarah stammered, her earlier excitement giving way to a wave of uncertainty. My life is here in Boston." She felt Max press closer to her side, as if sensing her distress. His solid presence grounded her, reminding her of why they were here in the first place. Dr. Ramirez's voice was gentle but firm. "I understand it's a lot to ask, Miss Thompson, but this could be a groundbreaking study. Your participation could pave the way for countless other rescue dogs to become service animals, giving them a second chance at life while providing invaluable assistance to people in need." The weight of the decision pressed down on Sarah. She thought of her carefully constructed life in Boston, the independence she'd fought so hard to achieve. Could she really leave it all behind for 6 months of uncertainty? But then she remembered the moment Max had saved her life, the instant connection she'd felt with this extraordinary dog. She thought of all the people like her who could benefit from a program like this, all the rescued animals who could find a higher purpose. Taking a deep breath, Sarah made her decision. "We'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Max and I are in." The room erupted in excited chatter, but Sarah barely heard it. Her world had narrowed to the feel of Max's fur beneath her hand and the enormous step they'd just agreed to take together. As Dr. Ramirez began outlining the next steps, Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She knew without checking that it would be Mark, probably wondering where she was. The thought of telling him about this new development filled her with a mix of anticipation and dread. But that was a conversation for later. Right now, Sarah allowed herself to be swept up in the excitement of the moment, in the possibilities that stretched out before her and Max. They were about to embark on an adventure that would challenge them both, push them to their limits, and potentially change the lives of countless others. As they left the lab that day, Sarah's head spinning with information and plans. She felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she and Max would face them together, and just maybe they'd make history in the process. Little did Sarah know that their journey was about to take them far beyond the realms of scientific study into a world of unexpected dangers, profound connections, and a love that would defy all expectations. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Sarah's decision to participate in Dr. Ramirez's study set off a cascade of changes in her carefully ordered life. She negotiated a temporary leave from her job, sublet her apartment, and began the daunting task of preparing for a 6-month stay in an unfamiliar state. Throughout it all, Max remained a steady presence at her side, his unwavering loyalty a constant reminder of why she'd agreed to this radical upheaval of her life. The night before their departure for Colorado, Sarah sat on her now bare living room floor, surrounded by packed boxes and the last of her luggage. Max's head rested heavily on her lap, his rhythmic breathing a soothing counterpoint to the tumult of her thoughts. "Are we crazy for doing this, boy?" she murmured, running her fingers through his fur. "Leaving everything we know, betting it all on this wild chance?" A soft whine and a gentle nuzzle were Max's only response, but they filled Sarah with a warmth that chased away her doubts. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Sarah's heart sank, knowing who it would be. "It's open, Mark," she called out, bracing herself for the conversation to come. She heard the door open and close, followed by Mark's hesitant footsteps. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" The concern in his voice was palpable. Sarah sighed, having had this same conversation multiple times over the past weeks. "Yes, Mark, I'm sure. This is an incredible opportunity, not just for Max and me, but for so many others who could benefit from this research. But Colorado?" Mark's voice was strained. "For 6 months? Sarah, your whole life is here. Your job, your friends, me." The raw emotion in his last word made Sarah's chest tighten. She and Mark had been dancing around the edges of something more than friendship for years, but neither had ever taken that final step. Now, on the eve of her departure, the unspoken feelings between them hung heavy in the air. "Mark," Sarah began gently, "I care about you, you know that, but this is something I need to do. For myself, for Max, and for all the people and animals this research could help." She heard Mark's sharp intake of breath, could almost feel the struggle within him. Finally, he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. Just promise me you'll be careful. And call, okay? Let me know you're all right." Sarah smiled, touched by his concern despite her frustration with his overprotectiveness. "I promise. And Mark, thank you for understanding and for being such a good friend." As Mark left, his goodbye tinged with a sadness that tugged at Sarah's heart. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was closing a chapter of her life. Whether it was for better or worse remained to be seen. The next morning dawned bright and early. The bustle of Logan International Airport, a cacophony of sounds and sensations that set Sarah's nerves on edge. Max pressed close to her side, his steady presence a calming anchor in the chaos. As they made their way through security and to their gate, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at how smoothly Max guided her, anticipating obstacles and gently steering her clear of busy travelers. It was as if he instinctively understood his new role in her life, rising to meet the challenge with an eagerness that both thrilled and humbled her. "Well, folks, looks like we're all set for boarding," the gate agent announced cheerfully. "And may I just say, That is one beautiful service dog you have there, ma'am." Sarah felt a surge of pride, tempered with a touch of guilt. "Thank you, but he's not actually a certified service dog yet. We're on our way to Colorado for a special training program. Is that right?" The agent replied, her voice warm with interest. "Well, from what I can see, he's doing a mighty fine job already. You two have a safe flight now." As they settled into their seats, Sarah's mind wandered to the uncertainties that lay ahead. She'd never been to Colorado, had no idea what to expect from the training facility or the people she'd be working with. The magnitude of what she'd undertaken suddenly felt overwhelming. "You okay there, sweetie?" A kind voice from the seat next to her broke through her spiraling thoughts. "First time flying?" Sarah managed a small smile. "No, just heading into a big unknown, I guess." "Ah, I know that feeling," the woman replied. "But you know what? Sometimes the biggest adventures of our lives start with a leap into the unknown. And it looks like you've got a pretty great co-pilot there." As if on cue, Max let out a soft huff, his tail thumping against Sarah's leg. She couldn't help but laugh, feeling some of her tension ease. "You're right," she told her seatmate. "I couldn't ask for a better partner on this journey." The flight passed in a blur of nervous anticipation, Sarah's mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. By the time they touched down in Denver, she felt equal parts exhausted and exhilarated. As they made their way through the unfamiliar airport, Sarah marveled at how smoothly Max guided her, his confidence giving her strength. They were met at baggage claim by a representative from the research facility, a cheerful woman named Jessica, who chatted animatedly about the program during the drive to their new temporary home. "You and Max are going to love it here," Jessica enthused. "The training facility is state-of-the-art, and the surrounding area is just beautiful. Lots of open spaces for Max to run and play when you're not working." Sarah nodded, trying to picture the landscape in her mind. "It sounds wonderful. I just hope we can live up to everyone's expectations." Jessica's voice softened. "Hey, no pressure, okay? You and Max are already doing something amazing just by being here. The whole team is excited to work with you both." As they pulled up to what Jessica described as a cozy cottage on the facility grounds, Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. This would be her home for the next 6 months, a base from which she and Max would embark on the most challenging and potentially rewarding experience of their lives. "Well, here we are," Jessica announced. "Home sweet home for the next half year. Why don't we get you settled in, and then tomorrow we can start with orientation and meet the rest of the team." Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of her journey. As she and Max stepped into their new living space, the reality of what they'd undertaken truly began to sink in. They were hundreds of miles from everything familiar, about to embark on an intensive training program that would push them both to their limits. But as Max pressed reassuringly against her leg, his tail wagging with excitement at the new scents and sounds around them, Sarah felt a surge of determination. They had come this far together, defying expectations and overcoming obstacles. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a team. As she unpacked her few belongings and began to familiarize herself with the layout of the cottage, Sarah allowed herself to dream of the possibilities that stretched out before them. If they succeeded, they could pave the way for countless other rescue dogs to become service animals, giving them a second chance at life while providing invaluable assistance to people in need. That night, as Sarah lay in her new bed with Max curled up beside her, she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks for the extraordinary dog who had changed her life in ways she never could have imagined. Whatever the coming months might bring, she knew that with Max by her side, she could face anything. Little did Sarah know that their greatest challenges and most profound discoveries still lay ahead. As she drifted off to sleep, the Colorado night alive with unfamiliar sounds outside her window, Sarah stood on the brink of an adventure that would test her resolve, challenge her perceptions, and ultimately lead her to a truth more extraordinary than she ever could have imagined. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to streak across the Colorado sky when Sarah awoke, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Max's warm weight against her leg quickly grounded her, reminding her of where they were and why. "Today's the big day, boy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. Ready to show them what we can do? Max's enthusiastic tail thumping against the bed was all the answer she needed. As they made their way to the training facility, Sarah's nerves jangled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The crisp mountain air, so different from Boston's city atmosphere, filled her lungs, invigorating her senses. "Good morning, Sarah, Max." Jessica's cheerful voice greeted them as they approached the main building. "Ready to get started?" Sarah nodded, squaring her shoulders. "As ready as we'll ever be." The next few hours were a whirlwind of introductions, orientations, and preliminary assessments. Sarah met the team of researchers, trainers, and other participants in the study, a diverse group of individuals with varying disabilities, all paired with rescue dogs of different breeds and backgrounds. Dr. Ramirez's voice was warm with excitement as she addressed the group. "Welcome, everyone. What we're attempting here is groundbreaking. To prove that with the right training and bond, rescue dogs can become exceptional service animals. Each of you and your canine partners have been carefully selected for this study. The road ahead will be challenging, but I believe the results will be truly extraordinary." As the day progressed, Sarah found herself both exhilarated and overwhelmed. The training regimen was intense, designed to push both human and canine participants to their limits. Max's natural instincts were impressive, but it quickly became clear that honing those instincts into reliable skills would take immense work and patience. By the time they returned to their cottage that evening, Sarah's head was spinning with new information, and her body ached from the physical demands of the day. Max, too, seemed exhausted, flopping down on his bed with a dramatic sigh. "I know, boy," Sarah chuckled, reaching down to stroke his fur. "It's a lot, but we can do this." "I know we can." As the weeks passed, Sarah and Max fell into a grueling but rewarding routine. Each day brought new challenges, new skills to master, and new bonds to forge, not just between them, but with the other participants in the study. There was Maria, a veteran with PTSD, paired with a gentle giant of a Rottweiler named Bear. Tom, a teenager with autism, working with a sprightly Jack Russell Terrier called Spark. And Elaine, an elderly woman with early-stage Alzheimer's, whose constant companion was a patient Labrador retriever named Sage. Sarah found herself drawn into this community, sharing struggles and triumphs with people who understood the unique challenges and joys of working with service animals. The dogs, too, formed their own social bonds, with Max often taking on a leadership role during group training sessions. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. About 2 months into the program, Sarah hit a wall. Despite their progress, she and Max struggled with some of the more complex tasks required for guide dog certification. Frustration mounted as they failed to master a particularly challenging navigation exercise for the 3rd day in a row. "Come on, Max," Sarah sighed, her voice tight with disappointment. "We need to get this right." She felt Max's hesitation, his usual confidence wavering in the face of her frustration. It was a moment of disconnect between them, and it shook Sarah to her core. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah sat on the porch of her cottage, the cool mountain air doing little to calm her turbulent thoughts. The soft click of nails on wood alerted her to Max's presence moments before he laid his head in her lap. "Oh, Max," Sarah whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. "I'm so sorry, boy. This isn't your fault. We're in this together, remember?" As if in response, Max let out a soft whine and nuzzled closer. In that moment, Sarah felt a profound shift in her perspective. She'd been so focused on the end goal, on proving themselves to the researchers and the world, that she'd lost sight of the most important thing, the bond between her and Max. The next morning, Sarah approached their training session with renewed determination and a different mindset. Instead of pushing for perfection, she focused on strengthening their connection, on truly listening to Max's cues and trusting his instincts. To her amazement, everything began to click into place. Max's confidence soared, and Sarah found herself navigating complex routes with a fluidity she'd never experienced before. It was as if they had found a new language, a way of communicating that transcended words or visual cues. Dr. Ramirez was ecstatic. "This is exactly what we've been hoping to see," she exclaimed, her voice brimming with excitement. the intuitive bond between human and dog, enhancing and amplifying their training. Sarah, Max, you're making remarkable progress. As word of their breakthrough spread, Sarah and Max became something of a sensation within the program. Other participants sought their advice, and the researchers eagerly documented their every interaction. But with success came new challenges. Sarah began to feel the weight of expectations pressing down on her. What if their progress was just a fluke? What if they couldn't maintain this level of performance? It was during one of these moments of doubt that Sarah received an unexpected call from Mark. "Sarah, are you okay? You haven't called in a while, and I've been worried." The concern in his voice brought a lump to Sarah's throat. Despite the distance and the new world she'd immersed herself in, hearing from Mark was like a touchstone to her old life. "I'm fine, Mark," she assured him, realizing as she spoke that it was true. "Better than fine, actually. Max and I, we're doing really well here." As she filled him in on their progress, Sarah was struck by how much had changed in just a few short months. She was no longer the same woman who had left Boston, unsure and apprehensive about the journey ahead. That's wonderful, Sarah," Mark said, a note of something pride, resignation in his voice. "I always knew you could do it, both of you." As they talked, Sarah felt a bittersweet ache in her chest. She missed Mark, missed the familiarity of her life in Boston, but at the same time, she knew she couldn't go back to the person she had been before. This experience was changing her, challenging her in ways she never could have imagined. After hanging up, Sarah sat for a long moment, lost in thought. Max, sensing her mood, came and rested his head on her knee. As she absently stroked his fur, Sarah realized that she was standing at a crossroads. The path ahead was uncertain, full of potential and challenges in equal measure. But as she looked down at Max, saw the trust and love shining in his eyes, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. They had come so far already, defying expectations and overcoming obstacles. This was just the beginning of their journey. With renewed determination, Sarah stood. Max instantly alert at her side. "Come on, boy," she said, her voice strong and clear. "We've got work to do." As they headed out for their evening training session, the setting sun painting the Colorado sky in brilliant hues, Sarah felt a sense of purpose and excitement coursing through her veins. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever discoveries awaited them, she and Max were ready to face them head on. Little did Sarah know that their greatest test was yet to come, a challenge that would push their bond to its limits and reveal a truth more extraordinary than anything she could have imagined. As the program entered its 4th month, Sarah and Max's progress continued to astound both the researchers and their fellow participants. Their intuitive connection had deepened to a point where they seemed to anticipate each other's needs almost before they arose. In the carefully controlled environments of the training facility, they were nearly flawless. But Dr. Ramirez had a new challenge in mind. Sarah, Max, she began one crisp autumn morning, her voice brimming with barely contained excitement. "You've exceeded our expectations in every controlled test we've put you through. Now it's time to see how you perform in a real-world setting." Sarah's heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and nerves. "What did you have in mind?" "We're sending you into Denver for the day, Dr. Ramirez explained. "You'll have a series of tasks to complete, navigating public transportation, visiting specific landmarks, even handling a mock emergency situation. We'll have observers shadowing you, of course, but they won't intervene unless absolutely necessary." The prospect was both thrilling and terrifying. Sarah had grown comfortable with the familiar surroundings of the training facility and the nearby small town. The idea of tackling a bustling city with all its unpredictable elements was daunting. But as Max pressed reassuringly against her leg, Sarah felt her confidence grow. They could do this. They were ready. The next morning found them standing at a busy bus stop in downtown Denver, the cacophony of city life swirling around them. Sarah took a deep breath, centering herself as she had been taught, focusing on Max's steady presence beside her. "All right, boy," she murmured. "Let's show them what we can do." Their first task was to navigate the public bus system to reach a specific destination across town. As they boarded the crowded vehicle, Sarah felt a momentary flash of panic. The confined space, the press of unfamiliar bodies, the constant stops and starts. It was overwhelming. But Max was a rock, guiding her confidently to an empty seat and positioning himself protectively at her feet. As the bus lurched into motion, Sarah marveled at how seamlessly they worked together, Max alerting her to each stop with a gentle nudge, helping her gauge when it was their turn to disembark. As they made their way through the city, completing task after task, Sarah felt a growing sense of exhilaration. They visited museums, navigated crowded sidewalks, even stopped for lunch at a bustling cafe. Each new challenge met and overcome with a synchronicity that felt almost magical. It was during their final task, a simulated emergency situation in a public park, that something extraordinary happened. As they walked along a winding path, a researcher posing as a distressed jogger suddenly approached, calling out for help. Before Sarah could even process the situation, Max was already in motion, guiding her swiftly but carefully towards the source of the commotion. As they reached the injured person, Max positioned himself in a way that allowed Sarah to kneel safely, his body a steady support as she assessed the situation and called for help as she'd been trained. The entire incident lasted only minutes, but as the researcher broke character to congratulate them, Sarah felt a profound shift in her understanding of what she and Max were capable of together. That was incredible, the researcher breathed, genuine awe in her voice. The way you two moved, it was like you were reading each other's minds. I've never seen anything like it. As they made their way back to the rendezvous point, Sarah's mind was whirling. She'd always known that her connection with Max was special, but today had shown her the true depth of their bond. It wasn't just about completing tasks or navigating obstacles. Together, they were capable of real, meaningful impact on the world around them. Dr. Ramirez was ecstatic when they returned, her eyes shining as she reviewed the observers' reports. Sarah, Max, you've exceeded our wildest expectations. The level of intuition and cooperation you've displayed, it's unprecedented in our research. But as the initial euphoria of their success faded, Sarah found herself grappling with a new set of questions. If she and Max were capable of so much more than traditional service dog tasks, what did that mean for their future? And how would this change the course of Dr. Ramirez's research? That night, as she lay in bed with Max curled up beside her, Sarah's mind wandered to the life she'd left behind in Boston. She thought of her job, her friends, of Mark, all the familiar anchors of her old life. How could she ever go back to that after what she'd experienced here? As if sensing her tumultuous thoughts, Max shifted closer, resting his head on her stomach. Sarah smiled, running her fingers through his fur. "What do you think, boy?" she murmured. "Where do we go from here?" The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. News of Sarah and Max's exceptional performance had spread through the scientific community, attracting attention from researchers and media outlets alike. Dr. Ramirez's team was inundated with requests for interviews and demonstrations. While part of Sarah thrilled at the recognition of what she and Max had accomplished, another part of her felt uncomfortable with the growing spotlight. She hadn't embarked on this journey for fame or accolades. She'd done it to prove that rescue dogs like Max could change lives. It was during a particularly grueling day of tests and interviews that Sarah reached her breaking point, as yet another camera crew asked them to repeat a complex navigation task. She felt Max tense beside her, picking up on her growing frustration and fatigue. "I'm sorry," Sarah said firmly, stepping away from the cameras. "We need a break. This isn't what we're here for." As she and Max retreated to a quiet corner of the facility grounds, Sarah felt a mixture of guilt and relief wash over her. Had she jeopardized the study with her outburst? But as Max nuzzled her hand reassuringly, she knew she'd made the right choice. Their well-being, their connection, had to come first. To her surprise, Dr. Ramirez was understanding when Sarah explained her concerns. "You're absolutely right, Sarah," the researcher said, her voice warm with empathy. "We've gotten so caught up in the excitement of your progress that we've lost sight of the bigger picture. This isn't about creating a spectacle, it's about improving lives." Together, they worked out a new approach. while Sarah and Max would still participate in carefully selected demonstrations and interviews. The focus would shift back to the practical applications of their bond. How could their techniques be taught to other handler-dog pairs? What implications did their success have for the future of service animal training? As they refocused their efforts, Sarah found herself taking on a new role within the program. Other participants began coming to her for advice, eager to learn how she and Max had developed such a strong connection. Sarah discovered a talent for teaching she never knew she possessed, helping others to deepen their bonds with their canine partners. It was during one of these informal mentoring sessions that Sarah had a revelation. As she watched Maria and Bear work through a challenging task, seeing the veteran's face light up with pride as they succeeded, Sarah realized that her journey with Max had a purpose beyond just their own growth. They had the power to inspire, to show others what was possible when human and animal worked in true partnership. This wasn't just about proving that rescue dogs could be service animals. It was about reimagining the entire concept of what service animals could be. As the program entered its final month, Sarah felt a bittersweet mix of emotions. Pride in how far she and Max had come, excitement for what the future might hold, but also a creeping anxiety about what would happen when they returned to Boston. How could she go back to her old life after everything she'd experienced? And more importantly, how could she ensure that what she and Max had discovered here would continue to benefit others? It was during a late-night conversation with Dr. Ramirez that a new possibility began to take shape. "Sarah," the researcher began, a note of hesitation in her voice. "I have a proposition for you, one that could change everything." As Dr. Ramirez outlined her idea, Sarah felt a surge of excitement mixed with trepidation. It was a bold plan, one that would require her to take a leap into the unknown once again. But as she looked down at Max, saw the trust and love shining in his eyes, she knew that together they could face any challenge. Little did Sarah know that the decision she was about to make would not only change her life, but would set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the bond between humans and animals. As she stood on the brink of this new adventure, the future stretched out before her, full of possibilities and hidden dangers in equal measure. Dr. Ramirez's proposition was as unexpected as it was exciting. The researcher proposed establishing a new branch of their program, focused specifically on developing and refining the unique bond Sarah and Max had cultivated. This new initiative would not only continue the work with rescue dogs as service animals, but would also explore the depths of human-canine communication and cooperation. "We want you to lead this project, Sarah," Dr. Ramirez explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Your connection with Max, your ability to teach others, it's exactly what we need to take this research to the next level." Sarah's mind reeled with the implications. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an opportunity to fundamentally change the landscape of service animal training and to help countless people and animals in the process. But it also meant saying goodbye to her life in Boston, to the career she built, to Mark. "I need some time to think about it," Sarah managed, her voice thick with emotion. Dr. Ramirez nodded understandingly. "Of course, take all the time you need. This is a big decision." That night, as Sarah lay awake in her cottage, her mind swirled with conflicting thoughts and emotions. Max, sensing her unrest, pressed close against her side, his steady presence a comfort in the tumult of her indecision. "What do you think, boy?" she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "Should we stay here, keep pushing the boundaries of what we can do together? Or go back to Boston, to our old life?" As if in answer, Max let out a soft whine and nuzzled closer. Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of clarity wash over her. Deep down, she already knew her answer. The connection she'd forged with Max, the work they were doing here, it was too important to walk away from. The next morning, Sarah called Mark. Her heart raced as the phone rang, knowing the conversation ahead would be difficult. "Sarah?" Mark's voice was warm, tinged with a hint of concern. "Is everything okay?" Taking a deep breath, Sarah began to explain Dr. Ramirez's offer and her decision to accept it. As she spoke, she could almost feel Mark's growing disappointment through the phone. "So, you're not coming back?" The hurt in his voice was palpable. "Mark, Sarah paused, searching for the right words. "What Max and I have discovered here, what we can do together, it's bigger than just us. We have a chance to help so many people, so many animals. I can't walk away from that." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Mark finally spoke, his voice was strained but supportive. "I understand, Sarah. I don't like it, but I understand. You've always been one to follow your heart, to fight for what you believe in. It's one of the things I loathe. One of the things I admire most about you." As they said their goodbyes, Sarah felt a mixture of sadness and relief wash over her. She knew she was closing a chapter of her life, but the excitement of what lay ahead buoyed her spirits. With her decision made, Sarah threw herself into preparations for the new project. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity, outlining research protocols, setting up new training facilities, and working with Dr. Ramirez to select the first group of participants for the expanded program. It was during this time that Sarah began to notice something extraordinary. As she and Max worked together to design new training exercises, she found herself anticipating his reactions with uncanny accuracy. More than once, she could have sworn she knew exactly what Max was thinking, almost as if she could hear his thoughts. At first, Sarah dismissed these moments as coincidence, or perhaps just the result of their deep bond. But as they occurred with increasing frequency, she couldn't shake the feeling that something truly remarkable was happening between them. One crisp autumn morning, as Sarah and Max were demonstrating a complex navigation exercise for a group of new trainers, it happened again. Just as they were about to round a blind corner, Sarah suddenly had an overwhelming sense of danger. Without conscious thought, she called out, "Max, stop." Max froze instantly, mere inches from where a large branch had fallen across the path, a potential hazard that neither of them could have seen or heard. The observers erupted in excited chatter, amazed at Sarah's apparent foresight. But Sarah barely heard them, her mind reeling with the implications of what had just occurred. She hadn't seen the branch, hadn't heard it fall. She had simply known. That evening, Sarah confided in Dr. Ramirez about the strange occurrences. "It's like I can hear Max's thoughts sometimes," she explained, feeling slightly foolish even as she said it. "Or maybe it's more like I can feel what he's feeling." I know it sounds crazy, but to her surprise, Dr. Ramirez didn't dismiss her concerns. Instead, the researcher's eyes lit up with intense curiosity. "Sarah, what you're describing is not entirely without precedent. There have been anecdotal reports of handlers developing an almost telepathic bond with their animals, but it's never been scientifically documented." The next day, Dr. Ramirez assembled a team of specialists, neurologists, animal behaviorists, and even a parapsychologist to begin a battery of tests on Sarah and Max. For weeks, they underwent brain scans, behavioral analyses, and a series of increasingly complex challenges designed to test the limits of their apparent connection. The results were astounding. Time and again, Sarah demonstrated an ability to perceive Max's intentions and emotional state with an accuracy that defied explanation. Even more remarkably, Max showed signs of being able to pick up on Sarah's thoughts and feelings, responding to unspoken commands and anticipating her needs in ways that left the researchers stunned. As word of their extraordinary bond spread, Sarah and Max became the subject of intense scientific interest. Researchers from around the world clamored to study them, to unravel the mystery of their connection. But with the increased attention came new pressures and ethical dilemmas. Some wanted to subject Sarah and Max to more invasive tests, to probe the neurological basis of their bond. Others saw the potential for military or law enforcement applications, pushing for the development of training programs to replicate their abilities. Sarah found herself at the center of a growing storm of competing interests and agendas. She had embarked on this journey to help people, to prove the potential of rescue dogs as service animals. Now, She feared that the true purpose of their work was being lost in the frenzy of scientific ambition and potential profit. As the demands on them grew, Sarah began to notice a change in Max. The once exuberant dog seemed subdued, almost wary at times. Through their bond, she could sense his unease, his growing fatigue with the constant tests and demonstrations. One night, as they lay together in their cottage, Sarah made a decision. Gently stroking Max's fur, she whispered, "We're not going to let them use us, boy. We're going to find a way to use this gift to help others, just like we always plan." In that moment, Sarah felt a surge of determination and love flow between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together on their own terms. The next morning, Sarah marched into Dr. Ramirez's office, Max at her side, ready to take control of their destiny and steer their research back to its original, noble purpose. Little did she know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would not only challenge the scientific community's understanding of human-animal bonds, but would also put her and Max in the crosshairs of powerful interests who saw their abilities as a threat to be controlled or eliminated. As Sarah prepared to make her stand, the air crackled with tension and possibility. The true test of their extraordinary connection was about to begin, and the outcome would have far-reaching consequences for not just Sarah and Max, but for the very nature of human-animal relationships worldwide. Sarah's meeting with Dr. Ramirez was intense, filled with passionate debate and moments of tense silence. Sarah laid out her concerns about the direction of the research, the ethical implications of some of the proposed tests, and her fears about how their discoveries might be misused. "We need to refocus," Sarah insisted, her voice firm despite the nervous fluttering in her stomach. "This isn't about creating super dogs or weapons for the military. It's about helping people, about giving rescue animals a chance to make a real difference in the world." Dr. Ramirez listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When Sarah finished, the researcher was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving between Sarah and Max. "You're right, Doctor," Ramirez said finally, her voice soft but resolute. "We've lost sight of our original goal. The pressure from outside interests, the allure of groundbreaking discoveries. It's clouded our judgment. But Sarah, you have to understand the magnitude of what we're dealing with here. Your connection with Max, it could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies communication, of consciousness itself." Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "I understand that, truly, but we need to approach this ethically, on our own terms. No more invasive tests, no more endless demonstrations. We focus on practical applications, on developing training methods that can help other handler dog pairs build stronger bonds." After hours of discussion, they reached an agreement. The program would be restructured with a renewed emphasis on its original goals. Sarah would have more control over which studies she and Max participated in, and a strict ethical review process would be put in place for all new research proposals. As they left Dr. Ramirez's office, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Through their bond, she could sense Max's relief and excitement. They were back on track, ready to make a real difference. But their troubles were far from over. News of the program's refocus spread quickly, and not everyone was happy with the decision. Several high-profile investors, who had been eyeing the potential military and law enforcement applications of Sarah and Max's abilities, withdrew their funding. The loss of financial support hit the program hard. Staff had to be let go, resources became scarce, and the future of their research seemed uncertain. Sarah watched with a heavy heart as some of her fellow participants were forced to leave, their dreams of working with their rescue partners cut short by budget constraints. It was during this tumultuous time that Sarah received an unexpected visitor. She was working with a young handler and her newly rescued German Shepherd when a sleek black car pulled up to the facility. A tall, imposing man in an expensive suit stepped out, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "Miss Thompson?" he called out, striding towards her with purpose. "I'm Richard Blackwood from Synergy Innovations. I was hoping we could have a chat about your work here." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard of Synergy Innovations, a powerful tech company rumored to have deep ties to government agencies and military contractors. Max pressed close to her side, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "I'm in the middle of a training session," Sarah replied coolly. "If you'd like to speak with me, you'll need to schedule an appointment to Dr. Ramirez's office." Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, my apologies for the interruption. I'll be in touch. Single quotes. As he drove away, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over her. Through her bond with Max, she could sense his agitation, his protective instincts on high alert. Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into her work, trying to push aside her concerns about Synergy Innovations and the program's financial struggles. She focused on developing new training techniques, working closely with the remaining participants to deepen their bonds with their canine partners. But the specter of outside interference loomed large. More than once, Sarah caught glimpses of unfamiliar cars parked near the facility, their occupants watching from a distance. Strange men in suits began appearing at local businesses, asking questions about the program and its participants. Dr. Ramirez did her best to shield Sarah and the others from the growing pressure, but the strain was evident in the researchers' tired eyes and tense demeanor. "We're doing important work here," she assured Sarah during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "We just need to hold on a little longer, prove the value of our research." It was during one of these strategy sessions that Sarah had a breakthrough. As she and Dr. Ramirez were discussing ways to quantify the benefits of their training methods, Sarah suddenly sat up straight, her eyes wide with excitement. "What if we could show them?" she exclaimed. "Not just tell them about our results, but actually demonstrate the real-world impact of our work." Dr. Ramirez leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" Sarah outlined her plan, a series of public demonstrations showcasing the practical applications of their research. Not flashy displays of Max's extraordinary abilities, but real, tangible examples of how their training methods could improve lives. They would work with local hospitals, schools, and community centers, bringing in handler dog pairs to assist with everything from physical therapy to emotional support for trauma survivors. By documenting these interactions and their positive outcomes, they could build a compelling case for the value of their work. Dr. Ramirez's eyes lit up with renewed hope. "This could be exactly what we need," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Not just to secure funding, but to remind everyone, ourselves included, of why we started this journey in the first place." The next few months were a whirlwind of activity as Sarah, Max, and the rest of the team threw themselves into preparing for their public outreach initiative. They worked tirelessly, refining their training techniques and carefully selecting the handler dog pairs who would participate in the demonstrations. As the day of their first public event approached, Sarah felt a mixture of nervous anticipation and fierce determination. This was their chance to show the world the true potential of their work, to prove that the bond between humans and animals could be a powerful force for good. The morning of the event dawned bright and clear. Sarah stood at the entrance of the local children's hospital, Max a steady presence at her side, as she watched the other handler dog pairs arrive. Each team had been carefully matched with a specific department or group of patients, their skills honed to meet the unique needs of those they would be working with. As they made their way through the hospital, Sarah's heart swelled with pride and emotion. She watched as a young boy, bedridden for months, laughed for the first time in weeks while playing with a gentle golden retriever. She saw tears of joy in the eyes of an elderly stroke patient as he successfully completed a physical therapy exercise with the help of a patient Labrador. But it was in the pediatric oncology ward that Sarah witnessed something truly extraordinary. As she and Max entered the room of a young girl undergoing chemotherapy, Sarah felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion that wasn't her own. Through their bond, she could sense Max's deep empathy for the child's pain and fear. Without prompting, Max gently approached the girl's bedside, resting his head on the edge of the mattress. The child, weak and pale from her treatments, slowly reached out a trembling hand to stroke his fur. In that moment, Sarah felt a surge of warmth and comfort flow through her bond with Max, directed towards the young patient. The girl's tense features relaxed, a small smile spreading across her face as she continued to pet Max. "He understands," the girl whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "He knows how I feel." Single quotes, Sarah nodded, her own eyes filling with tears. "Yes, he does. And he wants you to know that you're not alone, that you're strong and brave, and that he believes in you." As they continued their rounds, Sarah realized that something profound was happening. It wasn't just Max's extraordinary empathic abilities at work. All of the handler dog pairs were displaying a level of intuition and connection that went beyond their training. By the end of the day, the impact of their work was undeniable. Patients, families, and hospital staff alike were amazed by the positive changes they had witnessed. The local media, initially skeptical, were now clamoring for interviews and follow-up stories. As Sarah and Max left the hospital, tired but elated, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had shown the world a glimpse of what was possible when the bond between humans and animals was nurtured and respected. But as they approached their car, Sarah's elation was cut short. Richard Blackwood from Synergy Innovations was leaning against the vehicle, his expression unreadable behind his dark sunglasses. "Impressive work today, Miss Thompson," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I think it's time we had that chat. The future of your program may depend on it." Sarah felt Max tense beside her, a low growl rumbling in his chest. As she stared at Blackwood, she knew that the true test of their resolve and the fight for the soul of their research was only just beginning. Sarah's mind raced as she faced Blackwood, her hand instinctively moving to rest on Max's head. She could feel the dog's muscles tense beneath her fingers, ready to act at a moment's notice. "Mr. Blackwood," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I appreciate your interest, but as I said before, any discussions about our program need to go through proper channels. If you'd like to schedule a meeting with Dr. Ramirez." Blackwood cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Ms. Thompson, let's not waste time with formalities. We both know that your program is struggling financially. Synergy Innovations is prepared to offer substantial funding, enough to secure your research for years to come." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The offer was tempting, especially given their current financial straits. But the predatory smile on Blackwood's face set off alarm bells in her mind. And what exactly would Synergy want in return for this generous offer? She asked, unable to keep a hint of sarcasm from her voice. Blackwood's smile widened. "Nothing unreasonable, I assure you. We simply want exclusive rights to any technologies or methodologies developed through your research. And of course, we'd need you and Max to work closely with our own team of scientists." The implications of his words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Exclusive rights meant they would lose control over how their discoveries were used. And working with Synergy scientists, she shuddered to think what kind of experiments they might want to conduct. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood, but that's not something we're interested in," Sarah said firmly. "Our work is about helping people and animals, not developing proprietary technology for corporate interests." Blackwood's smile faded, his expression hardening. "I'd advise you to reconsider, Miss Thompson. Synergy Innovations has a lot of influence. We could ensure your program thrives, or we could make things very difficult for you." Before Sarah could respond, Max let out a low, menacing growl. Through their bond, she could feel his protective instincts surging, along with a clear message: this man is dangerous. "I think we're done here," Sarah said, her voice cold. "Please leave, Mr. Blackwood. Any further communication can go through our legal team." As Blackwood walked away, his parting words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "This isn't over, Miss Thompson. One way or another, Synergy will have what it wants." The drive back to the research facility was tense, Sarah's mind whirling with the implications of Blackwood's threat. She knew she needed to tell Dr. Ramirez about the encounter, but part of her feared that the lure of financial stability might tempt the researcher to consider Synergy's offer. As they pulled into the facility's parking lot, Sarah was surprised to see a flurry of activity. Staff members were rushing about, and there was an air of excitement that seemed at odds with the tension she felt. Dr. Ramirez met them at the door, her face beaming. "Sarah, Max, you're not going to believe this. We've just received word that we've been awarded a major grant from the National Institutes of Health. Our funding issues are solved." The news should have been cause for celebration, but Sarah couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in the pit of her stomach. The timing seemed too convenient. "Dr. Ramirez, that's wonderful news, but we need to talk." Something happened after the hospital demonstration. As Sarah recounted her encounter with Blackwood, she watched Dr. Ramirez's expression shift from joy to concern to anger. "This is unacceptable," the researcher said, her voice tight with barely contained fury. "We'll need to inform the board immediately. And Sarah, I want you to know that we would never consider an offer like that, no matter how desperate our financial situation might be." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Security at the facility was heightened. Legal teams were consulted, and Sarah found herself spending long hours in meetings, discussing how to protect their research from corporate interference. Through it all, her bond with Max continued to deepen. In moments of stress or uncertainty, she found herself relying more and more on their silent communication, drawing strength and clarity from their connection. It was during one of their training sessions that Sarah had an epiphany. As she watched Max guide a visually impaired participant through a complex obstacle course, she realized that their work had implications far beyond what they had initially imagined. The bond between human and animal wasn't just about service or companionship. It was a bridge between two worlds of consciousness, a way of expanding human perception and empathy. Excited by this new perspective, Sarah threw herself into developing new training protocols. She worked tirelessly with the other handlers, helping them to tap into deeper levels of communication with their canine partners. The results were astounding. Handlers reported increased intuition, heightened empathy, and even moments of what could only be described as shared consciousness with their dogs. As word of their breakthrough spread, the scientific community took notice. Respected researchers from various fields, neuroscience, psychology, even quantum physics, began reaching out, eager to collaborate and study the phenomenon. But with increased attention came increased scrutiny. Sarah began to notice unfamiliar faces lurking around the edges of the facility, cameras and recording devices poorly hidden. Strange cars would follow her on her drives into town, her email inbox filled with messages from journalists, government agencies, and corporations, all seeking information about their work. The pressure was immense, and Sarah often found herself overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility she felt. It was during one of these moments of doubt that she received an unexpected call. "Sarah, it's Mark. I saw you on the news. What you're doing there, it's incredible." Hearing Mark's voice after so many months was like a shock to her system. Sarah felt a wave of emotions wash over her: nostalgia, affection, and a twinge of regret for the life she'd left behind. "Mark, it's so good to hear from you," she said, surprised by the thickness in her voice. "How are you? How's Boston?" As they talked, catching up on months of missed conversations, Sarah felt some of the tension she'd been carrying start to ease. Mark listened intently as she shared her excitement about their breakthroughs, as well as her fears about the forces aligning against them. "Sarah, listen to me," Mark said, his voice filled with a determination she'd never heard before. "What you're doing is important, more important than I think even you realize. You can't let these corporate vultures or government spooks intimidate you. If you need help, legal support, anything, I'm here. We'll figure it out together." His words filled Sarah with a renewed sense of purpose and strength. She realized that in focusing so intently on her work and her bond with Max, she'd forgotten the importance of human connections. After hanging up with Mark, Sarah called a meeting with Dr. Ramirez and the core research team. It was time to change their approach. "We've been playing defense," she told them, Max a steady presence at her side, reacting to threats, trying to protect our work. "But that's not enough. We need to go on the offensive, not with force, but with information." Sarah outlined her plan. They would take their research public in a big way, publishing their findings in peer-reviewed journals, holding open forums for scientists and the public alike, and most importantly, showcasing the real-world applications of their work. The more people understand what we're doing, the harder it will be for anyone to misuse or suppress our research, she explained. We'll build a network of supporters so large and diverse that no single entity, corporate or governmental, can shut us down. The team was energized by the new direction, and they threw themselves into the work with renewed vigor. Sarah found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity, writing papers, getting interviews, and coordinating with other researchers around the world. But even as their support grew, so did the opposition. Synergy Innovations launched a smear campaign, questioning the validity of their research and the ethics of their methods. Anonymous online attacks sought to discredit Sarah and the other researchers. It was during this tumultuous time that Sarah and Max faced their greatest challenge yet. As they prepared for a major presentation at an international scientific conference, Sarah began to notice something wrong with Max. The usually energetic dog seemed lethargic, and through their bond, Sarah could sense a growing discomfort. Alarmed, she rushed Max to the veterinary clinic on the research campus. As they ran tests, Sarah paced the waiting room, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When the vet finally emerged, her grave expression sent a chill through Sarah's heart. "I'm so sorry, Miss Thompson," the vet said softly, "but we found something very serious." As the vet explained the diagnosis, Sarah felt as if the ground was crumbling beneath her feet. The bond that had brought her and Max so close that it opened up new worlds of possibility might now be putting his life at risk. In that moment, Sarah faced the most difficult decision of her life. How far would she go to protect their work, their discoveries? And at what cost to Max, the partner who had changed her life in ways she never could have imagined? As she looked into Max's trusting eyes, Sarah knew that whatever came next would test the true strength and meaning of the extraordinary bond they shared. Sarah's world narrowed to the sterile confines of the veterinary clinic as she struggled to process the vet's words. Max, her loyal partner and the cornerstone of their groundbreaking research, had developed a rare neurological condition. The vet's theory was that the intense mental connection they shared had somehow accelerated the growth of abnormal neural pathways in Max's brain. "We've never seen anything quite like this," the vet explained, her voice gentle but clinical. "The level of synchronization between Max's brainwaves and yours is unprecedented. It's possible that the strain of maintaining such a deep psychic link has taken a physical toll." Sarah felt as if she were drowning, her chest tight with fear and guilt. Through their bond, she could sense Max's confusion and discomfort, his unwavering trust in her warring with his own body's betrayal. What are our options?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. The vet's expression was grave. "We can try medication to manage the symptoms, but given the unique nature of his condition, we're in uncharted territory. The safest option would be to sever the psychic link entirely." The suggestion hit Sarah like a physical blow. Sever their connection? The very thing that had brought them so close that it opened up new realms of possibility for human-animal communication. "And if we don't?" she asked, already dreading the answer. "If the condition progresses unchecked, it could lead to seizures, loss of motor function." And eventually, the vet trailed off, but her meaning was clear. Sarah knelt beside Max, burying her face in his fur as tears began to fall. Through their bond, she could feel his love and concern for her, even now putting her well-being above his own discomfort. "I need some time," Sarah said finally, looking up at the vet. "To think, to say goodbye if that's what it comes to." The vet nodded understandingly. "Of course. We'll make Max comfortable here for the night. Take the time you need, but please understand that the sooner we act, the better his chances are." As Sarah left the clinic, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions and fragmented thoughts. She found herself walking aimlessly through the research facility grounds, barely registering the concerned looks from colleagues she passed. How had it come to this? All their work, all their discoveries, were they worth the price if it meant losing Max? And yet, if they severed the connection, would they be sacrificing the very thing that made their research so revolutionary? Sarah's feet carried her to Dr. Ramirez's office. The researcher looked up as she entered, her expression immediately shifting to one of concern as she took in Sarah's tear-stained face. "Sarah? What's happened? Where's Max?" As Sarah recounted the vet's diagnosis and prognosis, she watched Dr. Ramirez's face cycle through shock, disbelief, and finally, a deep sadness. "Oh, Sarah," Dr. Ramirez said softly, coming around her desk to embrace the younger woman. "I'm so sorry. This is not an outcome any of us could have foreseen." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Dr. Ramirez spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "Sarah, I know this is an impossible decision, but I want you to know that whatever you choose, you have my full support. Max's well-being and yours are the priority. The research, the program, none of it matters compared to that." Sarah nodded, grateful for the understanding but still feeling lost. I don't know what to do. Severing the connection feels like giving up, like betraying everything we've worked for. But if continuing puts Max at risk," she trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Dr. Ramirez squeezed her shoulder comfortingly. "Why don't you go home? Get some rest. Sometimes the path forward becomes clearer with a little distance." But as Sarah drove back to her cottage, she knew sleep would be impossible. Her mind raced with memories of her journey with Max, from their first meeting in that Boston alley to their triumphant demonstrations at the Children's Hospital. She thought of all the lives they had touched, the barriers they had broken. Could she really give that up? And yet, as she remembered the trust in Max's eyes, even as he lay in the veterinary clinic, she knew she couldn't prioritize their work over his well-being. As dawn broke, Sarah found herself back at the research facility, determination setting her jaw as she strode towards Dr. Ramirez's office. She had made her decision. But before she could reach the office, she was intercepted by a frantic lab assistant. "Miss Thompson, thank goodness you're here. Is Max? He's gone." Sarah's heart plummeted. "What do you mean, gone?" The assistant explained breathlessly that Max had somehow escaped from the veterinary clinic during the night. Search parties had been organized, but so far, there was no sign of him. Without thinking, Sarah closed her eyes and reached out through their bond. For a terrifying moment, she felt nothing, just a vast, empty silence where Max's presence should have been. But then, faintly, she sensed him. He was scared, confused, but alive. "I know where he is," Sarah said, her eyes snapping open. "I need a car." As she sped down the winding mountain roads, following the pull of their connection, Sarah's mind raced. Why had Max run? Was he trying to protect her from having to make an impossible choice? Or was this a side effect of his condition, a moment of panic or disorientation? She found him in a clearing near the base of the mountain, huddled beneath a large pine tree. As soon as he saw her, Max struggled to his feet, his tail wagging weakly. Sarah fell to her knees beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck as tears flowed freely. Through their bond, she could feel his relief at seeing her, his love, and something else, a sense of purpose, of determination. As she held him, Sarah suddenly understood. Max hadn't run away out of fear or confusion. He had come here, to this peaceful clearing, to show her something. Closing her eyes, Sarah opened herself fully to their connection. In that moment, she saw flashes of their journey together, not just the triumphs and breakthroughs, but the quiet moments of companionship, the unwavering trust and love they shared. She felt Max's understanding of the situation, his willingness to face whatever came next as long as they faced it together. And with that understanding came a profound realization. Their bond, the connection that had revolutionized their understanding of human-animal communication, wasn't just about the psychic link they shared. It was about the deep, unbreakable bond of love and trust between them. That was the true foundation of their work, the real key to bridging the gap between species. With sudden clarity, Sarah knew what they had to do. Back at the research facility, Sarah faced Dr. Ramirez and the team, Max steadfastly by her side. "We're going to sever the psychic link," she announced, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. "But we're not giving up. We're evolving." She outlined her plan. They would document the process of severing the link, studying how it affected both her and Max. But more importantly, they would show that the essence of their connection, the ability to communicate and work together in extraordinary ways, didn't rely on a metaphysical bond. The real breakthrough isn't in psychic connections or enhanced neural pathways, Sarah explained, her hand resting on Max's head. It's in understanding that animals are capable of depths of emotion, intelligence, and connection that we've only begun to comprehend. Our work moving forward will focus on developing training methods and communication tools that tap into that potential, not through supernatural means, but through mutual respect, understanding, and love. The days that followed were challenging. Severing the psychic link was a difficult and emotionally draining process. There were moments when Sarah feared they had lost everything, that the special connection she and Max had shared was gone forever. But as Max recovered, growing stronger each day, Sarah discovered something remarkable. Though the intense psychic bond was gone, their ability to communicate, to understand each other on a deep level, remained. It was different now, more subtle, requiring more active effort and attention. But in many ways, it was even more meaningful. Their work took on a new dimension. Instead of focusing on replicating the psychic link, they developed training methods that helped handlers and dogs build deep, intuitive bonds based on mutual understanding and respect. The results were extraordinary, opening up new possibilities for service animals, therapy programs, and interspecies communication. Months later, as Sarah stood on a stage at an international conference, Max sat calmly by her side as she presented their findings. The audience was captivated, not by tales of psychic powers or supernatural abilities, but by the profound implications of their research on animal cognition, emotional intelligence, and the untapped potential of the human-animal bond. As she concluded her speech, Sarah knelt down next to Max, looking into his eyes. There was no mystical connection now, no ability to read his thoughts, but in his steady gaze, his unwavering loyalty, and the gentle press of his head against her hand, Sarah saw something far more powerful, a bond forged through love, trust, and shared adversity. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." Max's tail wagged, and though no words passed between them, Sarah understood perfectly. Their journey together was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. As they left the stage to thunderous applause, Sarah felt a sense of peace and purpose she had never known before. The path ahead was uncertain, full of challenges and new discoveries waiting to be made. But with Max by her side and the lessons they had learned together, she knew they were ready to face whatever came next. Their story of a woman and a rescued dog who had changed the world's understanding of the human-animal bond was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning, opening up new chapters of discovery, compassion, and connection between species. And as they stepped forward into that future together, Sarah knew that the greatest adventure of all lay not in psychic powers or scientific breakthroughs, but in the simple, profound connection between a human and her loyal canine companion. If you enjoyed this story, we'd love for you to support us by leaving a like and subscribing to our Slices of Life channel. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which city are you talking about? It's very rewarding for us to provide our followers with an enjoyable moment. We appreciate the unconditional support you show us in every story. Blessings!